AMD kicked off CES 2024 with a PC-centric presentation laser-focused on AI. To no one's surprise, there's a new GPU for gamers, new CPUs, and new APUs. So something for everyone. Let's dive in. Today's video is sponsored by urcdkeys.com. If you want to activate your Windows, you can pay Microsoft $100 or more for a Windows 10 Pro key. Or you can get one from an OEM seller like URCD Keys, who have partnered with Cortex for a discount on what is already a really low price, for a total of just $15 when you use my code. The keys work globally, and you can even use them to upgrade to Windows 11. After you've made your purchase, you will find your key in your purchased orders on the URCD Keys website. Click on Get Keys and copy the key. Then in Windows, click on Start and type Activate, and then click Activation Settings. Then click Change Product Key, paste your key you just purchased, and click Next. That's it. Windows is activated. If you want Office 2021 Professional, you can use the same C25 code and get it for just under $84. URCD Keys has a New Year's super sale going on right now, so you can get even more savings until the 31st of January. A huge thanks to URCD Keys for sponsoring today's video. Check the links in the description to get your cheap OEM Windows key today. AMD started their presentation by sharing some new information on the 8040 series mobile APUs. Honestly, it feels like the 7040 series didn't really do much to excite consumers, and here the only interesting improvement, as far as I can tell, is the higher clocked NPU. As far as gaming performance, even though the 8040U is iterative versus the 7040U in the 7 titles shown by AMD, the integrated 780M is beating Intel's Arc graphics on Meteor Lake by up to 60%. I'm not sure if there's really a market out there for the integrated AI hardware just yet, but I guess it can't hurt to have access to faster processing in the Adobe AI suite, for instance. Next, AMD moved on to gaming, and they touted the company's presence not only in the consoles, but also on the new portable PC handhelds that launched last year. I actually got to try the Lenovo Legion Go recently, and boy, that thing is much bigger in person than one would expect, and not particularly premium feeling, if I'm being honest. It should be noted that MSI also announced a new handheld, which is powered by Intel's Core Ultra 155H. Not sure who asked for that, but there you go. Now for the desktop, the most interesting announcement from AMD were the 8000G APUs. So this is combining Zen 4 CPU cores with 700M graphics and an integrated NPU for AI tasks. I always get the feeling that each gen's APUs from AMD take too long to release, and they generally come out at a point in time where just getting an older gen discrete GPU makes more sense. It's sort of sandwiched between old gen and new gen releases. So anyway, we've got 4 new SKUs: the 8700G, which is the top dog with 8 cores, the 8600G and 8500G with 6 cores, and the 8300G, which has 4 cores, and thus should just be avoided like the plague unless you really need something very low power. It's OEM only for now anyway. So as these are basically the Phoenix and Phoenix 2 based silicon but ported for the desktop with a 65-watt TDP, you get similar features like the integrated NPU for AI, at least on the 8700G and the 8600G. And you also get RDNA 3 graphics, which is the key feature here. CD Projekt Red announced that the 8700G can run Cyberpunk at 1080p without the need for a discrete GPU. They showed some gameplay, which to me didn't really look full HD. The textures looked blurry and the edges of objects looked noisy, so clearly this must be the very lowest possible settings. But considering Cyberpunk is not exactly an easy to run game, this seems like a worst case scenario for the target audience of these APUs. When we look at the current top 20 most popular games on Steam, we find games like Counter-Strike 2, Dota 2, Baldur's Gate 3, Team Fortress 2, and many other games that don't really require powerful GPUs, so the 8700G will likely meet the expectations of those looking to build a gaming rig on a tight budget. AMD shared some internal numbers, and with low settings you can see the APU can run even older AAA titles at 1080p 60fps and higher. If you want to run more recent AAA games, AMD has the Adrenaline features to try and compensate for the lack of performance power. So for instance, Starfield, according to AMD at least, with Hyper RX tracks and fluid motion frames enabled jumps from 32 FPS to 61 FPS. It remains to be seen what that will do to latency, in other words, how the game actually feels to play, but the fact that you can actually play such a graphically demanding game on an APU is impressive, even if it's using some trickery to do so. At $329, this is definitely better value than buying a current Gen 8-core CPU plus an entry-level discrete GPU that matches the 780M, so I think AMD has a winner here. I'd like to see some numbers on the 8600G, but going from 12 CUs to 8 CUs probably relegates that to esports titles only. I'll try and get my hands on an 8700G and build a media PC and run some games on it to see if it's worth your time, hopefully at some point in the coming weeks. I really hope it doesn't disappoint, because I think this could finally be the APU that makes entry-level GPUs unbuyable, especially with these adrenaline features. Stay tuned for that. And lastly, AMD announced a 7600 XT, which is a slightly better 7600 with 16 gigs of VRAM. On paper, this looks like a reasonable addition to AMD's lineup at $329. The problem is you can already get an RTX 4060 at $300, and even if that card only has 8 gigs of VRAM, for the target audience who will be playing mostly at 1080p, Nvidia just has better features. So you'd be trading Nvidia's feature set for an extra 8 gigs of VRAM, presumably to run games at higher resolutions, but in a GPU tier that's not quite going to cut it for 1440p high settings. And more than competing against Nvidia, I think AMD is competing against themselves, because you can get a 6700 XT brand new for the same price as the 7600 XT. It only has 12 gigs of VRAM, but it will actually let you jump to 1440p, so it seems to me like a more well-balanced option at this price point, making the 7600 XT kind of dead in the water if you ask me, and that's not even taking into account the used market. Now, of course, Nvidia did just announce their Super refresh, and I think that will have an impact on pricing for the AMD cards, but I'll talk about that tomorrow when I look in more detail into the 4080 Super, 4070 Ti Super, and the one that seems the most interesting to me, the 4070 Super. In fact, seeing as there are so many GPUs out there, I might do a chart of the GPUs I would recommend at each tier. That should be fun and not controversial in the slightest. Thanks for watching, and subscribe so you don't miss my future videos.